Hello and welcome. My name is Ryan Tappy and I work with the ALS Association. Thank you for joining us for another installment of our Living with ALS webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Now is the Time to Travel: Success Strategies for Accessible Travel. There are a few things we want you to know before we begin. First off, please know that you are muted and not on camera so you can relax and enjoy the presentation. There will be time at the end of this webinar to answer questions. You should see a chat box feature on your screen as well as a Q&A feature. You can use either of these options to submit questions you may have. All messages submitted will only be viewable by the host and panelists. We will review and answer these questions with our speaker at the end of the webinar. We do have a very short survey we are asking that everyone complete after the webinar. The survey will appear in your browser once the webinar ends. This survey helps us to know your thoughts on this presentation and topics you would like us to consider in the future. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website in the Care Services webinar page within about a week. Summer is a time when many of us travel to vacation or to visit faraway family members. ALS presents certain challenges to travel, so we are delighted to be joined by Sarah Marshall from TravelAble to discuss some strategies that can help make your travel plans a success. Sarah is a certified travel advisor and founder of TravelAble. TravelAble is a full-service travel and disability travel advocacy agency with a mission to make the world accessible through custom-curated vacations. In 2009, Sarah's journey was redefined by the very premature birth of her son while stationed in the Middle East. This experience and the subsequent navigation through medical and cognitive diagnoses and challenges taught her and her family firsthand the developmental and mental health benefits of travel. In 2018, Sarah used this passion and knowledge to create TravelAble. She is also a sought-after speaker presenting around the country on her secrets to travel success. Sarah gives presentations to societies, therapy centers, parent universities, and other community gatherings, and is very proud of her partnership with the ALS Association. We are so happy that we were able to have Sarah join us today. I will now hand it over to Sarah, and I will hop back on to facilitate the question and answer when she is done presenting.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm glad to be here. Ryan and I were just commenting on the fact that I've been a partner of the ALS Association since 2018 when I founded the company, and loved meeting all the folks out in the Illinois chapters and Wisconsin chapters. So if you're in from Madison or Milwaukee or Orland Park or any of those wonderful places, know that I remember you and I say hello. So today's webinar is going to be a little bit of me teaching you what I would normally do when I'm planning a trip, giving you all the secrets that travel agents might hide from you so that you can do it on your own. But of course, if you want my help, I'm always here as well. So I am the founder, as Ryan said, of TravelAble. We are a full service travel agency. That does mean we can do flights, hotels, tours and transfers, things like that. We are a little bit different than a normal travel agency in that we don't always go with the suppliers that other travel agents go with, because we're looking for specific people that can do accessible travel in the countries in which our clients want to visit. So a little bit about us. We were founded in 2018. Currently we have 7 staff. Out of those 7, we have 1 wheelchair user, 2 caregivers of disabled individuals, and 2 of us are living overseas, including myself, who lives currently in England. We also have another lady who lives out in Bucharest, Romania. We're all diplomatic spouses or former diplomatic spouses and travelers of the world. We have partnerships with accessible travel companies worldwide. So the idea is that instead of just putting you on a Carnival cruise and letting that be it, we're focusing on those suppliers that are making changes within their countries to make it easier for accessible travel to happen. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. If you are looking for a travel agency and you're wondering, how can I tell that they're any good? There are a number of certifications. These are mine, but you can also check others as well. Obviously, we're accredited by IATA. That is the international standard for travel agencies. So you want someone that is accredited by IATA. We're a member of the European Network for Accessible Tourism. That's a lot of information sharing between organizations on countries and drivers and whatnot. I was a speaker at the Abilities Expo since I no longer live in the US at the moment. I'm not, but I know there's one in Chicago, I know there's one in Florida, in LA, Phoenix, and I think Houston. Go to those Abilities Expos and talk to the people that are doing travel, because there usually is somebody and they're fantastic. I'm a certified travel advisor. It is a credential given by the Travel Institute. I'm also a certified autism travel professional and an accessible travel advocate with special needs group, and then a member of ASTA. So in any case, I always recommend the first thing is using a travel agent. I'm not going to require you to use me. In fact, over the summer, we are actually reducing our client load. But because of my ALS partnership, I just want you all to know that I'm here for you, and you're more than welcome to call me or email me at any time. No obligations to get advice or to meet other travel agents or whatever you need. So why is adventure so important to me and to us, our family? This is my lovely little family. My husband, Scott, is a diplomat. And then there's me and our now 16-year-old, although in this picture, I think he was 13, old son, Aiden. So Aiden was, as Ryan mentioned, was born prematurely. In the top left, that picture there is him flying back from Israel, where he was born, in an incubator, because he needed oxygen support. He had a feeding tube for many years. He's had a number of different bone-related issues. He now has epilepsy as well as autism and ADHD and anxiety. So as you can imagine, traveling has been difficult. However, when he was 5, we had the opportunity to move to London, and everyone said, "Oh, it's gonna be so bad not having him in the U.S. public school system." And I said, "Well, let's give it a try." And he is autistic, so transitions and things were difficult. But he did phenomenally in England. And when we arrived in England, he was nonverbal, not toilet trained, and completely fed by G-tube. Within the first 6 months, he was speaking, he was toilet trained, and he was starting to eat by mouth. By the end of our tour in London, we were able to remove the feeding tube completely and have it closed surgically. So that was a huge opportunity for us to understand that taking Aiden out of his comfort zone, the same therapies every day, the same this every day, and challenging him to do something different was tantamount to his development and his ability to travel. So the bottom right, I guess, the one of us in front of the Northern Lights, that was one of the most recent trips we took to Finland. And he's 15, almost 16 in that picture, and had a wonderful time, was able to deal with cold, enjoyed seeing the Northern Lights, took his own photos. I'm not going to say that it is the easiest thing in the world, but it definitely is memorable and is something that he has used to further his own development, and it makes me proud to be his mom a little bit. So when I start working with a client, I have 3 basic strategies that I go through. And as I said, I'm going to tell you all the secrets. I'm not keeping anything from you. This is all the stuff that I use as a travel agent. And the first thing everyone always asks me is, where can I go? The thing is, while the destination is important, you can go anywhere. And so the journey, trying to figure out how you get from point A to point B, is where the meat is. And so I can tell you that we can make any place accessible, but depending on your specific needs, your specific concerns, what makes you anxious, what makes you comfortable, things like that, that will dictate the journey that you take to get to that destination or to a similar destination. So this is just a quick looking at what all of the most recent domestic bucket list destinations are and international bucket list for most people. And you'll see that, like, for domestic, for instance, is Hawaii. We have a wonderful provider in Hawaii, where you can rent wheelchair adapted vans. So you can get off the plane in Hawaii, roll right onto your own car, wheel yourself around, drive around, see everything in Hawaii that you would like to do. They have outposts in Maui, Oahu, and the Big Island. So, just because Hawaii is maybe a far distance from where you are does not mean it's not accessible. We would have to talk through the flight, but once we got to the flight, all of the resources that you have in Hawaii will be there. Alaska, very similar. We have a lot of clients that take cruises up to Alaska. They can be made very, very accessible, full tours, getting on boats, things like that. As you can see, all of these places are highly accessible. Similarly, if you look at the international bucket list destinations, in Italy, we have a wonderful partner in Italy who does door-to-door wheelchair accessible travel throughout the country. We've had people going on trains to Venice, to Florence, on gondolas, all the places that you might dream of going in Italy can happen. Is Rome accessible? If you look at it from just looking at it, maybe not, but our providers in Italy are the people that we work with know accessibility, and so they can go in anywhere. So you really can roll around and do what you need to do in Italy. United Kingdom, I live there now. It's not the most accessible, but again, we have wonderful providers, door-to-door service. Ireland, same thing. Australia, I had clients that did a cruise, flew to Sydney, did a cruise around Australia, got back off in Sydney, and then did a cruise that went from Sydney to New Zealand, all the way around New Zealand. They weren't able to get off at every port, but again, we worked through that and they knew that up front. So the ports that they could get off, we had fully accessible vans, pick them up, tours done. They got to see all of the thermal sites that they wanted to see, play with kangaroos, do all the things that they wanted to do, hike in the Blue Mountains, and know that they could have everything that they needed right there. Greece, I just got back from Greece. We have a wonderful provider there. Same with France. Japan, I've sent numerous clients to Japan. It can be done. And again, all these other places are as well. And I really want quickly before I leave this slide, because someone I just noticed had asked about unaided. Unaided just means they didn't prompt the surveyor. It does not mean unaided like accessibility. It means that they didn't put these and ask them to rank them. They left it blank. So it was unaided of a survey, that's all. Just so that you didn't think it was meant to be accessibility. So here are some local accessible destinations that we have been to and also have sent clients to. There are, and these are like sort of off the beaten path, Gulf Shores, Alabama, a wonderful beach destination. They've installed Moby mats, which are those, if you see the picture in the middle with the blue mat that stretches to the ocean. A number of Florida, South Carolina, and Alabama Gulf beaches have now installed these mats that allow you to roll completely into the water. You can also rent beach wheelchairs, things like that. But they also have a number of really fantastic vacation rentals that are ramped and are fully accessible. Salt Lake City, we've sent people to Salt Lake City. We've sent people to the national parks, so Grand Tetons and Yellowstone. Gatlinburg, Tennessee, the cabin there in the bottom left, that's in Gatlinburg. So if you're a Dollywood fan and you want to go down there, you could not only get a hotel, but you could also get a cabin. San Diego, Washington, D.C., St. Augustine, Florida is surprisingly very accessible, and Seattle, Washington. Now, this is just a sample. We've sent people to many other places than that, but in general, you can go wherever your heart desires, and we can try to help you make that happen. So one of the companies that we use to make things happen, and you can contact them directly if you're interested, is called Special Needs Group. And they do medical supply rentals across the United States, as well as major cruise ports in Europe. So if you were to go on a cruise, let's say Holland America, and you needed a Hoyer lift or a patient lift, and you ordered it through the cruise line, it would come from Special Needs Group. So we've had, for instance, people who needed to go to a funeral in the middle of New Jersey in a very small town. and they prefer to sleep in a recliner or a lift chair. And so we've had it so that special needs group goes to the hotel, installs the lift chair, delivers oxygen, shower chairs, whatever they need, so that when the patient arrives or when the person arrives, that everything is already set up in the room for them. So this is a huge service, especially for people who maybe you want to go visit your child who's in the military and they're on an Air Force base in the middle of nowhere in Arizona, knowing that your hotel, we can have things installed into your hotel so that you can feel comfortable while you're there, can be a huge excitement, for people who haven't been able to do that before. As you can see, there's small pictures of everything that they have, but they also have oxygen. They're the major supplier of oxygen for major cruise lines. Mobility scooters, if you prefer to have it delivered as opposed to take it with you, and wheelchairs. So wheelchairs, and we'll talk about them in a little bit. I understand that they're a lot of money. They are your legs and your ability to get around. And a lot of times they're customized to your preferences. You want to take them, but you're afraid that they might get damaged. And so sometimes we talk through the benefits, the costs and the benefits of renting a wheelchair in your destination versus taking your wheelchair with you. So that's more of a personal discussion you can go through later. These are all the areas that special needs group serves. As you can see, Sydney, Australia. So if you needed something in there, they're willing to do that. The Europe, that's all the major cruise ports, and then the major cities. But as I said, these are just the major cities. But if there are small towns in between, we can also have them deliver it at a cost. It just depends on what you're asking for. When you do that, you should be getting copies of these slides, so you'll have all of this. I'm not going to read them all out, but just know that most of the places you would like to go, they are there. So that's strategy number one, is figuring out where it is you want to go, figuring out how we're going to make it happen. And then the next strategy is know who to ask for help. So obviously, as I said, I always recommend using a travel agent, but if you wanted to do it yourself or you just needed advice, here are some other here's some other ways or other people that you can ask for help. So the first is TSA Cares. So if you already have travel planned through a US airport, every US airport has a TSA Cares. The bigger airports, the international airports, are going to have larger centers than the smaller regional airports, but they all should have TSA Cares. And basically it is a way to get through security in a manner in which it's better for you and it takes more time. It allows you to to explain your anxieties, what might cause you distress. You won't have to get out of your wheelchair, you won't have to take your shoes off, things like that. Basically you set it up, you fill out the form that's on the slide here, or you can call them or email them at least 72 hours prior. You tell them where you're flying and they will set it up. In some situations, you get out of the car at the terminal and they're waiting for you. In other times, you have to ask. But if you filled out the form, they should have record that you need assistance. This is a great opportunity if you, for instance, if you're mobile, but you have liquid medications or you travel with a number of devices, you'll want to do TSA Cares just because you don't want to have to explain all of that going through regular security. Basically, you get assigned one TSA agent, they take you into a private line and they go through it with you at your leisure. It really is very helpful and something you can set up for yourself as well as others. Just FYI, because people sometimes ask me, what can I bring? What can't I bring? These are all the things that TSA lists that are allowed through security. So even if you've been through security before and they've said no, this is why TSA Cares is really important, because you could take this list and say, but it says, TSA says, that I can bring all of these things. The one thing that we have had trouble with recently are oxygen tanks. So we recently had a number of people traveling that used ventilators and carried concentrator, an oxygen concentrator that's approved by the airline on the flight. However, the issue becomes that airlines are no longer storing supplemental oxygen tanks on board. And so the pilot, apparently, this is all new to me, but the pilot has the ability to say, because of the route we're flying, or because of this or whatever, if you can't fly this route without supplemental oxygen through your concentrator, you cannot fly. And they won't say that until you actually get on board the flight, which is really super annoying. And when Ryan says that I'm a disability advocate, basically that's what we do, is we are talking to the airlines, we are liaising with people who make these decisions to have them understand that that's not acceptable, and not acceptable practice. However, if you are on a ventilator and you did want to travel, this is a conversation we can have with the airlines. You do definitely want to have somebody on your side that can liaise with the airlines and security, so you can make sure that you can get there. But just know that if you do need supplemental oxygen, you will need an airline approved concentrator, because there are no longer supplemental oxygen tanks on board. So if you call the airlines, the travel agent trick is that you tell them to add a specific code. This specific code allows the airlines from the beginning of your flight to the end of your flight. So maybe you're flying to Paris, but you have 3 layovers. Having these codes on the flight actually carries through all 3 layovers. And so they are listed here. Again, I'm not going to read all of them out, but they are very specific as to what your disability entails. So you would find the one that most meets your criteria. You might find multiple, and that's okay as well. The airline needs to know how to make your travel the most comfortable. So wheelchair assistance is required. Passenger can walk a short distance up or down stairs. That's if you are going on a flight where you're on the tarmac and then you have to climb the stairs. If you can't climb the stairs, obviously that's not the code for you. So when you're looking, just make sure that you're looking for the code that works for you. Those are all the wheelchair codes. These are all the codes for additional challenges. So if you're blind, deaf, if you're currently using a voice support and you want them to know that you're not able to speak, things like that. If you're traveling with a support animal, if you require oxygen, if you have a peanut allergy, blah, 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 blah. So there's all of these different codes. So basically, if you go to Expedia and book a flight, you can't enter the codes. But if you call American Airlines and you book your flight, you can say, I have disabilities and these are the codes that relate to what I need. And then they will set up everything for you. These are the codes that we use as travel agents when we are liaising with the airlines as well. So then the third strategy is always, 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 always have a plan. And I think this is where travel agents are kind of useful in making sure that you have a plan A, plan B, plan C. I once had clients, they had, it was a young lady and her husband wanted to take their elderly parents to China. And they said, both of my parents need mobility scooters. And I said, okay, that's fine. But in China, a lot of the public toilets and restaurants and hotels are squat toilets. So if they can't get into a squat toilet, are you going to be the one that helps them in? Or is your husband this is something you need to consider. They said, well, we're not comfortable with that. That is totally fine. If you wanted the Chinese experience, but you wanted more European style, let's try Singapore. And so, we can give you the same experience, but know that you are feeling comfortable. That's what I mean by plan A, plan B, plan C. If you are dead set on a plan A and you haven't thought through all of the various different things that might happen, then you might get upset if something bad happens or you're not able to go through with the plan you had in place. So here are some before you go tips to help you create your plan. You should always speak with your healthcare provider before you go. Many destinations require vaccines, especially if you're going to, for instance, sub-Saharan Africa. You'll probably want to travel with a medical note that explains why you use the equipment that you use, why you have any medications, things like that. So that if someone questions you, which I know again is a horrible thing to say, but should someone question you, you'll want to have official documentation on hand. I know that in Italy, for instance, a lot of tourists are using the fact that you can get tickets to things. If you're disabled, a caregiver and yourself can get tickets to things for free. So they're now requiring you to have proof of disability. And showing up in a wheelchair, unfortunately, does not make them believe. So you do have to have some sort of note that from your doctor that explains what's going on. Additionally, if you had to be hospitalized while you were overseas, or even in the United States, and you were at a hospital system that does not have your records, it would behoove you to have like a one pager that explains what your medications are, who your doctors are, what you like in hospitals, what you don't like in hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. You want to be very, very clear when you're contacting everyone about your disability and your needs. So if you're able to transfer into a regular vehicle, that's great, as long as we know that the regular vehicle has space for the wheelchair. So we want to make sure that when you're contacting all of these places, that you're very specific. Not I use a wheelchair, but what kind of wheelchair, what kind of services do you need? Are you comfortable with a ramp? Is your wheelchair too heavy for a ramp? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of times hotels will say, yes, we have an accessible airport shuttle, but you still have to step into it. It's not one that's adapted for wheelchairs. So in that regard, they're supposed to legally pay you what they feel is the fair amount for a taxi to bring you to the hotel. They're supposed to pay you because they're not able to provide you that service. So again, you have to be very clear and specific with describing what you need so that you can get exactly what it is that you want. Anything that you need when you arrive, let's make sure that's prearranged. So if you need, a scooter, oxygen, wheelchair, whatnot, make sure that all of that is prearranged. Okay, so these are just, again, some tips. Airlines specifically, again, you're gonna call the airlines ahead of time to set up assistance. They're gonna ask you height, weight, and length of your wheelchair with you in it and without you in it, if it folds, if it doesn't fold, what kind of battery it has, is it dry or wet cell, all of those questions. So if you have that pre-written down, so you could just copy and paste it, that's great, or let them know what it is. I would say plan at least 90 to 120 minutes for layovers. I never plan for my clients less than 2 hours. Solely because by the time you get off the plane, use the facilities, whatnot, and get to the next gate, you might have to go through a transit line, you might have to go through security again. There's a whole bunch of things to think about. So I always recommend you plan at least 90 to 120 minutes for layovers. So that's, an hour and a half to 2 hours. Medical supplies fly for free. So if you have an entire suitcase of medical food or pieces or a Hoyer lift or whatever, all of that can go for free. It does not count towards your baggage allotment, but it does need to be tagged appropriately. If your chair comes apart, so for instance, if you can take off the headrest, the footrests, the armrests, the electric components, if you have a joystick, for instance, any sort of adjustments that you've made, cup holders, things like that, you want to make sure that you label all of them so that if you take them off and they're in a suitcase that the airline checks that they're given back to you, that you have the appropriate pieces. I also recommend that if you have a wheelchair that does not fold, that you attach the manual so that they know how to operate it safely. And basically what I do is I take a full-size Ziploc bag, put it in the Ziploc bag, zip it shut, and then put like punch a hole in it and then put a zip tie through it. And that way, if the baggage handlers are like, okay, we're having trouble with this, let's see how this works, then all of the things are right there. Make sure you ask the airline for seats ahead of time. A lot of times they will accommodate you. So if you, for instance, book a flight and you're assigned the very seat in the back, you want to make sure you call the airlines almost immediately after you book your flight to ensure that you get the seat that you want. I'm not guaranteeing that you can upgrade to business class from economy, but they might be able to put you in the bulkhead seats or on an aisle in which the armrest goes up and down. So you always want to make sure that you call that ahead of time. If you need the aisle chair to transfer, if you need assistance with transferring, all that stuff has to be done ahead of time. I will say, while we're talking about airline tips, about wheelchairs and wheelchair breakage. Knocking on my fake wood desk that I'm sitting at right now, I have not had a wheelchair damaged for any of my clients that have traveled with a wheelchair by making sure that we're planning it out and making sure that everything works specifically. There, I cannot, I can't prevent something from being damaged. But I will say that taking the steps to ensure that the airline knows how to appropriately take care of your wheelchair goes a long way in making sure that it comes back to you in one piece. We also have a lot of global contacts to wheelchair repair people. So if you get somewhere and something is broken, the airline is, if the airline has broken, they are supposed to fix it. But a lot of times that means you can't go on your vacation or you can't go forward on your trip because your wheelchair isn't working. We do have global repair people and you can claim that back to the airline. But that being said, a lot of times we do discuss, again, ways to prevent your very expensive, nice wheelchairs from being damaged by renting a similar style, maybe not as custom made, but similar style when you arrive, or giving you options for ways to travel that minimize flights so that you can remain in your wheelchair. So maybe train travel is better, maybe driving, things like that. So all of these things are things that we discuss when we go through our planning. If you're a cruiser, I'm not a cruiser, but I know that they're a wonderful product for accessibility. Just know that if you have booked a cruise and you have noted that you want an accessible stateroom, if you have not filled out the cruise line's form that you legitimately need the accessible stateroom, they will take it away if someone else comes and has the form. So make sure that if you have a cruise booked and you have indicated you want the accessible stateroom, that you have filled out all of their required forms. Again, you'll want to make sure that you have documentation of your medical records in case you have to be airlifted off the ship or in case you have to be treated on the ship. Most ships nowadays have a doctor and nurse on board that can do dialysis and things and smaller procedures like that. But should you need something larger scale, you'll want to make sure that you have like a one pager that lists everything that you need. You can request an excursion list from the cruise line that meet your specific needs. They will ask you a number of questions that say, are you comfortable with stairs? Can you do this? Can you do that? What are you most comfortable with? And then they will send you what they have. They already have pre-made documents, but they don't advertise them on their website because things change so quickly. And if there's nobody requesting them, they won't offer them. So we have to make sure that we're always requesting those documents so that they understand that accessible travelers do exist and want these excursions. And make sure that if you use a power wheelchair or a mobility scooter, that your room is next to an elevator. I have had a number of clients that have been placed in accessible rooms that are at the ends of the ships because those are the only accessible rooms remaining. And their power wheelchair and their mobility scooters do not work well on the carpeting that they install on the floor. So you want to make sure that, for ease of movement and getting to the elevator, that you have your room near or adjacent to an elevator. Just some quick Amtrak tips. We do a lot of, I'm a partner for a number of adaptive sports teams, and they often have events or conferences and things in which they take the train. Amtrak is really easy to use in some locations. It's not as easy in others, but you can make reservations online or you can call If you do need accessibility accommodations, you do have to call. They won't allow you to make those online. You can book it online, but then you have to call to actually get the seating. So that is something. Okay, so then you want to make sure that you make a reservation if you need a wheelchair space. So some people like to transfer into a regular seat, but then the wheelchair can't just stay in the aisle, so you have to be seated next to a place where the wheelchair can be stored. So you have to ask that specifically. Or maybe you want a transfer seat where you can stow your wheelchair, maybe it folds or something like that. They also offer accessible sleepers. So if you are going on a long journey, perhaps across Canada or something fun like that, they do offer accessible sleepers. So you can get one, and it would have an ensuite with grab bars and a roll-in shower. And then we want to make sure that both the arriving and the departing stations have ramps available for you to get on and off the train. So that's, again, just make sure. They also offer multiple discounts. There's military, there's disability, there's veterans, there's senior citizens, etc. And it really does reduce the fare. So if you're thinking of traveling by train, make sure that you ask for that fare discount, so that you can get a better price. If you are a bus traveler, you can go on Greyhound as long as they have 48 hours advance notice if you need assistance or you need the adapted buses. In this, again, I'm not going to read all of it, but they do have lift equipped buses, but the wheelchairs have to be a certain poundage with the person inside of it. So you just have to make sure that you fit in those requirements. If you need certain different ways of being transferred into your seat, that's all listed there. If you are traveling with a care attendant or a caregiver, they can get a discounted trip alongside of you. Service animals you can bring, and then there are rules for portable oxygen and respirators with a max of 4 canisters. So 2 could go down in the baggage and 2 can be on board with you. Okay, hotels. Before you book any hotel, I always email the front desk directly or call the front desk directly and request photos. A lot of times hotels, especially in the United States, will say they're accessible room, but they're in fact perhaps hearing accessible, which is a valid accessibility concern. However, if you require a roll-in shower, hearing accessible rooms do not always have a roll-in shower. I went on a travel conference and I asked to stay to view their accessible room, and they said, okay, we'll put you in the one with the roll-in shower that had a lip that was this tall. I said, that is not a roll-in shower, friends. That is a walk-in shower, because you can't roll over a lip that's that tall. So I always, even if they say it's a roll-in shower or whatnot, I always request pictures. They often have them on file, so it's not like they have to go into the room and take them. You can ask for measurements. So if you need the height of the bed, if you need to know how much space there is under the bed, if you use a patient lift, if you need a certain amount of turning radius around the toilet area, grab bars, etc., you want to make sure that it is the room that you need and that will fit your needs. If they don't respond to you, don't stay there. There are so many hotels nowadays that are doing accessibility right. There are a number of European chains. Scandic is one. It is throughout Scandinavia and Germany, and they're owned by a wheelchair user. So all of their hotels are barrier free. They have every room has some sort of roll-in shower, but if you need one with a bench or a shower chair, they have different, kinds of rooms. So again, you want to stay there because they're going to send you pictures. They know how to do accessibility. And so in any case, I just say if they want your business, they will treat you well. And if they don't respond, don't go there. When you check in, if you are concerned that the room will not work, ask to see it before they charge your card. So if you arrive at the hotel and they say, oh, I'm sorry, the accessible room is taken, so we put you in this one that has an accessible tub, go into it, see if it will work. If it won't work, you can leave and not be charged. That's if you don't prepay. So I always recommend that you don't prepay and that you pay a little bit more to cancel when you get there. basically just to make sure that it is accessible. There is something called walking out. It happens a lot in Europe where they oversell hotels. And then when you arrive, they'll say, oh, sorry, we're oversold. We're going to walk you to our sister hotel across the street. And unfortunately, accessibility doesn't always transfer. So you want to be able to say, no, I'm sorry, that's not going to work. We need to find another hotel and not have to pay for the original hotel. So when inquiring about a hotel, ask about entrances and exits. Because a lot of times their accessible entrance is like through the kitchen, and you end up, having to wait for somebody to come open the kitchen door, and then it smells and whatever. See if, is it a flat entrance? Is there a ramp to the entrance? Do I have to have a key to get to the entrance? Things like that. Does the pool have a lift? If you require a lift and you would like to go to the pool, that's a valid question that you can ask. What amenities are important for you? Is laundry important for you? Is having a small kitchenette important to you? Or a fridge for medications, things like that. These are all the questions that I ask for my clients because I know their needs and what they would require in a room. But they're valid questions, and you can certainly ask them of any hotel before you stay there. As I spoke about the shuttles to the airport, are they accessible? Explain the accessibility. What will they offer you if they're not accessible? They should offer to pay. It's illegal in the United States. It's maybe not so illegal in Europe and other countries, but it is illegal in the United States for the hotel to not offer you a comparative transport from the hotel to the airport and the airport to the hotel if they're offering for someone else. All right, 10 days prior to your check-in, this is a travel agent secret. 10 days prior to your check-in, they assign the rooms. So I always call 10 days prior to the check-in and make sure that the room that you want to be in is the room you're in. Then call again 2 days prior and confirm. Again, that's why you use a travel agent, because then we do the calling and you don't have to do it. And then make sure that you have the names and titles of everyone that you talk to, so that if ever they're like, oh, well, we didn't know you needed an accessible room, you could say, oh, I spoke with Victoria and she said on this date that it would be there. All right, so that is all that I have to present, because normally I just answer questions, things like that. As I said, I'm not currently taking new clients. I'm dealing with some personal things. However, my partnership with the ALS Association is very important. So if you have personal questions, things that you've booked that you want help with, you want me to point you in the right direction to other travel agents I work with, whatnot, this is my contact info, our website, my direct email, and then our toll-free number, which reaches our operations manager, Natalie, who lives in Georgia. And she can certainly be of help to you and pass along any messages. So with that, I guess I open the floor to you, Ryan, and any questions that people
Yes.
have.
Yes, thank you so much. And you can keep that up while we go through the Q&A. So people, if they are interested in asking some questions or getting in touch with you, they can. But thank you for that great presentation, those wonderful tips. We are now going to go through some questions that we did get. We got quite a lot of great questions. If you do have a question, you haven't submitted it yet, just use the chat feature or the Q&A feature, and we will try to get to it with the time we have left. So I'm going to go through a couple quick ones first. The first one being, do you recommend TSA pre-check, or is that necessary when traveling with a diagnosis like ALS?
It is not necessary if you have TSA Cares, because it's basically, TSA Cares is actually better than TSA PreCheck, because it's not just getting through the line quickly, it's having a dedicated security official helping you through the security process. I would, however, recommend Global Entry if you're traveling internationally, because when you come back to the United States and have to go through customs, Global Entry will allow you to go through customs a lot easier. So I do recommend Global Entry, but TSA PreCheck, it's really up to you and how you're feeling and that kind of thing. Global Entry does include TSA PreCheck. So
Okay,
if you get it, you get both.
great. And you mentioned in the presentation that you can work with TSA Cares for liquids, medications, nutrients. So is it safe to say that if someone requires liquid nutrition or medication, they will be okay to travel with that.
Yes, definitely. I just recently had a client whose son traveled with TPN,
Okay.
and so they actually brought a cooler bag, like a giant cooler bag, um, with ice packs and all of the packs. And obviously it can't be opened because once it's opened, it has to be used. So what I suggested to her is a trick that we used to use, which is you make a small bottle of it in front of them. So like you maybe you have an extra little bit left over, whatever, for them to swab to test that it's not drugs. And then once they've done that, then they will allow you to go through without testing every single one. But it's why TSA Cares is so important, because if you go through a regular security line, they would probably want to take it all out and ask where you got it and all this other stuff. So
Okay, wonderful. One that just came across was asking, is there a way to be recognized as a caretaker while traveling? TSA Cares has a card for the different disabilities, but not for the caretakers. Or maybe better phrased, is there anything a caregiver needs to do so that they can be recognized as the person's caregiver?
I don't know that there is an official answer to that. I will say anecdotally, I have not had any trouble naming people as caregivers. On the TSA Cares form, they'll say, how many people are you traveling with? So if you're traveling with your whole family, you can put 6 people and they will take all 6 people through the TSA Cares line. Um, as in terms of like Amtrak and stuff like that, or even trains in Europe, as long as one person on that reservation is disabled, is has marked that they are disabled, the other person automatically counts as a caregiver. So if they're over 18.
Okay.
So again, you can certainly carry a note that says I am the caregiver of X, Y, and Z, but for the most part, if you are one person traveling with someone that is recognized as a disabled person, then they will assume that you're the caregiver.
Okay. And kind of going off that, you mentioned traveling with groups. Do you find airlines are able to accommodate requests for group seating to ensure that the person is sitting with, caregivers, family members,
Oh
things like
yeah, definitely. So in general, they will only guarantee the caregiver and the disabled person in the same area.
that? Okay.
If the airline is nice enough, they will try to accommodate the family. But for instance, I'll just give an example of a client I recently had was traveling with one disabled person and then 3 other kids. So the husband and 2 of the kids were in one row, and then like 2 rows ahead was the caregiver, the disabled person, and one of the kids. So again, they did the best that they could to make sure that all the people were together. Um, but it might be that they can't accommodate everybody if it's a large party.
Okay. Okay. And a more practical question, do you find that if someone were to go on a cruise, that there would be enough room for Hoyer lifts or
Yes.
bulkier equipment?
And you want to make sure that um, the size of the room that you are booking. So if you require a Hoyer lift and you book an inside room, it's going to be very, very tight. It'll be bigger than a normal inside room, but it'll still be very, very tight. If
Okay.
you're booking a suite, a lot of times what they do is they take out one of the beds or the sofa to allow for extra space to slide the Hoyer lift underneath the bed. And so in those situations, um, those rooms are often of a higher level. Um, but yeah, in general, like the better cruise lines and the better rooms tend to have more space than the accessible rooms. Like I'm just trying to think like Carnival, Royal Caribbean, sort of the budget, their rooms are very, very small.
Okay.
Holland in general, Holland America, Celebrity, Princess, their rooms are a little bit bigger. And then the luxury lines, their rooms are a lot bigger. So it's going to depend on how much you want to pay, unfortunately, as to how much space that you're going to get. But that being said, all rooms that are marked as accessible with a roll-in shower should allow for a Hoyer lift to fit under the bed. It just might be very tight.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, how far in advance should someone with ALS start planning a trip? What would your recommendation be for that?
So in general, I recommend people always start at least 6 months ahead. I know with many of my ALS friends, time is of the essence. And so we have planned in 2 weeks, so it can be done. If you want to go overseas, though, I would suggest 6 months, at least 3 to 6 months,
Okay.
for availability purposes, especially if you're traveling in the high season. For local destinations, a month ahead, a couple weeks ahead, if you're really looking to go somewhere and need some help.
Okay. And we have some great questions here. Any advice regarding travel insurance for someone with ALS? Are there certain things they
Yes,
can
and
look out
actually,
to?
I'm really surprised I didn't have a slide in here. I think I took it out about travel insurance. So I always recommend travel insurance, um, because it not only covers obviously cancellation or needing some, it covers baggage damage. So if your wheelchair is damaged, um, and it's not the fault of the airline, you can actually, though, it counts as baggage if it's in the baggage hold. You can claim it as baggage damage and the insurance will cover it. I've had people whose medical supplies were lost. They eventually got returned, but the insurance covered the replacement item. So, that's a huge thing. It also covers emergency evacuation. You never know. I've had people who there was a story that they tell, maybe it's a myth, but there's a story that they tell about a woman who went on a Caribbean cruise, very simple. Her husband had an appendicitis in somewhere in Mexico. They airlifted him to Mexico. And even though they could literally drive across the border, their US health insurance would not help them get out of Mexico. So they were basically stuck in this limbo of like, we need to have an air transport for him to get back to the United States. Insurance covered everything, but she
Okay.
didn't have insurance. So she had to pay out of pocket. But anyway, my point being, those things happen and to anyone, not even related to ALS. But with any sort of health condition, you run the risk of needing emergency health care. We recently had a client whose wife went into a coma in Scotland. He did have insurance and it covered a lot. It covered,
Okay.
it covered the hotel they had to cancel. It covered her hospital stay, new flights, all that stuff.
Okay.
So, travel insurance is definitely something I recommend getting.
Okay. In regards to the special codes, one audience member asks, what if they have two wheelchair codes? In this instance, traveling with a portable wheelchair and a removable battery pack, and needing assistance boarding slash aisle chair. I'm guessing you can give them multiple codes based
Yes,
on
you
your
can
need.
give them all the codes if you want.
Okay.
But any code that pertains to you should be added.
Okay.
And I might say, because airlines are the worst, adding one code does not necessarily indicate that they add other codes. So
Okay.
if you say, I can't climb stairs and I need assistance onto the plane, that does not also mean that you get boarding assistance. You have to
Oh,
request both. So
great.
just be aware that anything that pertains to you, you want to request.
Great advice. A couple of specific questions here, and I'm not sure if you can answer them, but if you're able to provide any insight. Two audience members asked specifically about Sweden and Mexico, if you feel those are destinations that are accessible, possible. Um, do you have any insight into those two specifics, or just?
Yeah, so Mexico is a great one. It's easy to get to. Um, Many of the resorts are accessible. I will say though, it's one of those destinations where they say they're accessible, but then there's cobblestones.
Mhm.
So really making sure that you understand what you're comfortable with. A lot of the accessible rooms are not on the ocean, so you might only have a view of the pool. That might be a deal breaker for you, things like that. You just want to make sure that there are a number of resort groupings, I will say, that do really well with accessibility. Barcelo is one, Iberostar is another. Most, if not all, of their properties are highly accessible and they promote their accessibility. Margaritaville is another one. They just recently opened a new one in Dominican Republic, but they have a number of properties in Mexico. They do great on accessibility. There's also Palladium Resorts, I think. There's a number of them that are very good with discuss. We also have a wonderful tour driver So I recently had, well, not recently, it was last year, but I had a client who went to Mexico and wanted to see Tulum, and was able to get there and go see Chichen Itza and everything with the driver. We had recommended he used a manual wheelchair, and we recommended that he get electric because of the cobblestones. And so he rented it just for the day of the tour. And then when he got back to his hotel, he realized there were cobblestones in his hotel that were causing him back problems. So he could have had the wheel, the electric wheelchair the whole time. So anyway, little things like that are things you want to think about.
Sure.
Sweden, I'm planning a accessible trip right now for an amputee to all of the Scandinavians. They, a lot of the Scandinavians, Germany, I will include with them. They don't like to highlight accessibility. They like to highlight this universal design and barrier free. So if you see the words barrier free or universal design, it usually means that they are thinking about accessibility, but finding those actual pieces, like the roll-in shower that is actually roll-in, that actually has a shower bench, all that stuff, has to be set up. But most of the museums and things like that, they are all widely accessible. So
Great. Um, we have a audience member who their father's trying to visit family. He has no mobility. Are there any travel options in which he can use his power chair without having to get off of it?
unfortunately, no,
Okay.
unless you spring for private air. I have researched that for people in the past. It is prohibitively expensive.
Okay.
Um, the only option, there are a number of organizations that will fly people for medical transport in private planes. Um, you have to apply for their process, and I'm not sure that you would like that would be a case. But if you had a friend that was a pilot that could get their hands on um, a chair adapted plane, and could fly you there, that would be an option. Again, it's very expensive. So.
Sure. Another quick practical one. I know we're running short on time here. One person says when they've flown into Mexico, they usually get off the plane on a portable staircase rather than a tunnel. Do you find when that is a situation that they can accommodate wheelchairs with when they're getting off on the runway, for lack of better terms?
I mean, in those situations, they have to be carried off.
Okay.
But if we have enough, pre-warning, we can contact the airport to get a scissor lift, which are those boxes that they put the meals on with. And so they will bring you off onto the scissor lift. And that's how they got my son in that picture on the incubator. They put him
Okay.
on a scissor lift, lifted him up onto the plane, brought him on the side, and then took the scissor lift back down.
Okay. And just a couple more questions, two more questions here. A quick one. For US hotels, do you ever find options for elevated toilet seats? Or you had mentioned having certain equipment delivered. Is that a type of attachment that could be delivered to a hotel for someone who requires an elevated toilet seat?
Okay, so I have not come across a specific hotel that has an elevated toilet seat. The problem with renting an elevated toilet seat is it becomes a hygiene issue for the company that is renting them.
I see.
So they will rent commode chairs, but for an elevated toilet seat, or I've even rented for people before, like a bidet attachment, if that's how the best way to wash themselves. Um, we always recommend just getting one off of Amazon and taking it with you. You can also get it off on Amazon and have it delivered to the hotel. We've done that before as well. So, but it's because of the hygiene issue. They're usually apt to either request that you get a commode chair, which is not the same thing, or you buy your own, unfortunately.
And just one last question, a good one to end this on, I believe. For you, as someone who has a personal connection to traveling with the challenges of medical issues, any advice personally that you can provide for someone who feels nervous or overwhelmed about traveling with a disease such as ALS?
That is a wonderful question. And I will say, if you can find the support that you need to talk it through, talk it through. So, as I said, call me, contact me, email me. I've, I, I've had clients who we've talked about travel for years before they've bitten the bullet. Just going through their anxieties, finding ways to make them feel a little more comfortable with things, setting up, um, I don't know, setting up opportunities for them to trial something to get to feel more comfortable. If you're a solo traveler, there are a number of accessible group trips. You know, to travel with some others that might be going through the same thing might be really rewarding. And if, you know, I would say if you're looking to travel, don't like go to Japan on your very first trip. Like go somewhere local first, get all the kinks out, figure out what you like, what you don't like, um, and then, you know, gradually increase the distance in which you're comfortable traveling. I would suggest going that way. But um, I will say one of the organizations you should check out is called Wheel the World. They do group trips, and it's usually like 5 to 6 wheelchair users and family members. If you are a solo traveler, I do have a connection to a caregiver that is willing to travel with you. She's a registered nurse and she has now set up a service where she travels with people. So, you know, those kind of resources exist as well. So you can have somebody with you. Um, and you know, a lot of it, I sometimes say I'm a travel therapist. A lot of it is just talking through it with somebody and saying, this is what I want to do. Is it crazy? And me saying, no, but let's be realistic about some things and get it all out in the open and then make you feel more comfortable about it.
Well, great, great. Well, we are unfortunately out of time, and I know we went a little over, but I would once again like to just thank our wonderful speaker, Sarah, for the amazing presentation. Before we end the webinar, I want to take a moment to share some exciting news regarding our ALS webinar series. We are very excited to be launching a rebranded webinar series, and we're actually going to be launching it tomorrow. The new series will be titled Empowering the ALS Journey, a webinar series. Living with ALS is not a single moment, it is a journey, one that deserves compassionate support, practical tools, and empowering knowledge every step of the way. Our focus with the new series is to provide the tools and support you need to face each day with confidence and dignity. Whether you're navigating daily challenges or celebrating life's moments, our goal is to empower you to live fully and with purpose. So I encourage those in attendance today to keep an eye out for our July e-newsletter, which will have some more information on the rebranded series, including a new and easier to navigate web page where you can find recordings of our past webinars and links to register for the upcoming webinars. Now, the link that you have used in the past to access these webinars will still redirect you to this new webinar page, so you can still use that link to access the new web page once it launches. And lastly, a final reminder that you will receive a short survey when we end this webinar. Thank you to everyone who was in attendance today, and thank you again to our speaker, Sarah Marshall. We so appreciate the information, and we hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you.